soaked chili crickets in wine sauce. Just a bunch of whining. We are living in a lot of rain this year. I don't know where it all went. I hope all these forward-thinking governments were smart enough to put a dam in. No, I didn't cuss. It was a 3-letter word. We're going to have to step up. It's all up to us. We were told we have, this thing keeps coming back around to me. This Esquire, this Inns of Court dude from long time back told us, we gave you a republic if you can keep it. That was the marching orders. It's not my rule, folks. I'm coming into this as much as y'all are. If we could keep it, and they gave them the license to come and steal it, and they did on a number of levels, and that's why it's up to us if we want to do anything better than what's being done for us. We have to do that, and that was one of our weaknesses. It's real hard to get people together. There's lots of reasons. I won't even get into it. I'm not even a psychology major to understand it. I just know that it's there. There's realities. You can make up all kinds of stuff if you want, but the bottom line is there's a reality. And we were talking in the chats before, and boy, I've kind of reached my limit on being able to hit all the networks and all the chats, but so much to do right before the broadcast as well. There's reality out there. You can call it whatever you want, and you're going to have to either fess up to it, or not. Both, I guess, or not. And I've chosen to just. Well, again, I was pretty naive. You just have to know I'm nobody. I'm really not that special more than anybody else. Maybe except to the point that I did focus and I've been persistent for 3 decades to understand where did that thing we're told where America went. And I'm speaking to all the world now. I mean, and as amazing as this internet is, literally, there was an example in the world that did have the foundation completely different than the rest of the tyranny of the world, the anarchy of the world, whatever name you want to put on it. The people who you end up dealing with a bunch of gangs that are whoever's the biggest gang wins. I mean, it's just really that simple. That's a human nature problem. We're not solving that. That's the hardwired problem. Before I can move anywhere else, I have to acknowledge that. Again, for me, the Kane principle is pretty solid on this. When you have someone that will blame you on the responsibility they were obligated to do and failed, and will kill you over that, you realize that we're not wired right. There's something not right. And until we can 100% kill that in us, stop that in us, as well as the other the seven sacred sins or whatever the heck you want to identify, all these, what I call the human frailties. Until we deal with that, we're going to have interesting relations amongst each other. And I thought the guy on Corbett, Friedman, I thought that his name was interesting too, folks. As we look at who's brought before us on the stage of information, he also was the economist. Corbett was interviewing him, and I think he had it exactly right. And I find it amazing that an economist would come up with this a correlation that we exist as people wherever we are as a peace treaty. I have to agree. And when you start seeing the world in that, and it's not a good thing to see because you're almost having to predispose the world to evil. And then I have to just tell you that's the fallen nature. If nothing else, if it doesn't go beyond it, that we have at least that in ourselves. That I think the characterization, if we needed a term to focus on, the real thing you have to look at is that we are in any society or group of people, you're existing in a sort of peace treaty. And the economist connection, which I find interesting, is that a peace treaty is typically, although nothing's exclusive here at this level, is typically done for really economic or commercial reasons or comity for the purposes of exchange and trade. That's another connection that's kind of on us. It's like this millstone around our neck. And so when you look at the world, and this Friedman gentleman, I think it absolutely can be viewed as the categories of definition that we, each one of us, as I've told you, I can view each one of us, as a nation unto ourselves, even though we're not. I mean, we can see the fractal, that we have organs in our body that are organized. That's how we're organized, and we have the capacities of our own government, been brought into the reality of the world in international law. Even the United States of America is dealt with as nations abroad themselves agreeing to be underneath a central district, not under to the extent that it's under, but under the regulation, which is to make regular the commerce of every nation abroad each other. Understand the terms I'm using. This came from a court case. I can't find it anymore, but this is how I started to figure this out. I started reading for what the judges are telling us. And you start to really see a different picture. But the nation, the states as we understand them are abroad each other. There is an imaginary, it's all fiction, but this is how we deal with each other. Because the interaction's a fiction as well, if you get into it, but they're abroad. They're literally sitting in Admiralty, and they're as if there's an ocean between the states of the United States. That's how they're treated. They're abroad each other. Even though when you go there, you don't see any water. And so you start to have to throw this into the equation that they're in international law, if I can say it that way. And there is a regulation authority given to Congress to regulate trade across commerce amongst all these nations. Now, there's a whole bunch of adulteries about that. I'm just trying to lay this thing out about how we get to us, why we are in a peace treaty amongst ourselves. If we're nations under ourselves, men and women, we make these treaties because there's this Cain principle, at least. There's a whole lot of other things. And the sins and all this other stuff we're told, which are in us. What I tell you, the Protocols of Elders of Zion, if you stop reading it for the propaganda prejudice that they want to put on you and look at it as an instruction manual for some of your failings, you may come to start to see this, that a peace treaty coming from an economist, looks very, very consistent with what's going on. That we essentially are in a mutual agreement to make peace underneath certain conditions is what societies are. And when you start seeing that we're in a peace treaty, then you have to have, well, who's making the war? Well, it ends up being what I consider, it's my opinion now, evil. It's this evil that's a condition that we have to live within. And until we get rid of these fallen natures in us, we are going to have to live under these tenuous. They even tell us our laws build a tension. If you notice, listen very carefully what they're telling us. And until we can get rid of these frailties, we have to essentially live with in a condition of a treaty of peace amongst each other, no matter where we are. And that's what our societies tend to be. And I tend to agree with that. I thought that was very astute as a term to come up with that. It has a lot of other implications. In a treaty of peace, there's a victor in a treaty of peace. And that's what I'm saying. We, all of us, have to succumb to the overpressing evil, which wins. And we agree underneath this, in this dynamic, in this condition of the world, to agree to live with each other, or not, depending on which band of gang, of group we define ourselves as. Now, individually, we may be, pure as a driven snow, or we hope to think so. But it doesn't seem to work out in reality, in the realness of our interactions. And so, just not to go too deep onto that more than I did, but I found that little, for all of y'all that are having discussions on all this, because see, to me, you got to solve that. You need to answer that and get past it, because we have work to do. Forget the fact that we're together as a society and what's been working. You're looking at a failed system that had the foundation for much better. And so my view, and it came through the mining law, and I know people roll maybe their rolls by, their mind goes weird, what the hell does that mean? It's property law. And it gave me the insight of what that is about. Why? Absolutely why it's important. And then the relationship between the so-called government, which is of our making by our treaties of peace to do what? To try and maintain a peace. And so this is what settled the land, is we can have some predictability. And if we were harmed, we gave ourselves the ability, despite our frailties and our emotional condition and all this other stuff that may throw in, some sort of semblance of some objective basis of interpretation for the interactions that don't quite live up to the peace. When we don't keep the peace. See, it's all right here if we just see it. So for me, I want us to see that, and I want us to stop making excuses to get to the point that we really did have to keep a republic. And then I've tried to define to you what I've found that really is. It's not just this term, this idea. It's actually it's a term that you can function under to bring and keep the peace. The problem is those that infiltrate and usurp the seats of decision of this have caused it to go, it's the way of our fallen nature. And so, that I did want to touch that. I thought that was very astute. A treaty of peace, that implies, it implies the world is not a nice place, just as much as I've been telling you that. It's not because I like that. It's just the fact of it. I talk with people, we chat I don't think there's someone that I chat with most of the time. I don't see of anybody that actually, we were to be neighbors, that we would be warring with each other. So I'm not even talking to us. But I know there's those others out there. I know there's a whole raft of people. Yeah, a bunch of refugees from the law, I can tell you that. A raft of people that don't like me. And that's simply because I'm bringing in the law that they just don't want to, they want to keep their head in their sand, or they want to make a big deal about what they think they know and how they think they can apply it. And they want to deny the destruction against them. And that reminds me to thank you again. The few people that came in on the petition of Jefferson Mining District, thank you for stepping up to tell them that you don't believe that an attorney who has no title to your property has the right to represent you, at least by his statement that he contacted you and you gave them a consent. That's a lie. JeffersonMiningDistrict.com. Go to the petition, sign it on. It should be just send them a message, because that's really more of what it is. It's a simple way to dialogue, if I can say, call it a dialogue with the committee of a state of Oregon that accepted this guy's representation of all your properties that have a mineral interest, and that would be all the land, because all the land has a dominant domain and dominant estate that sits underneath the surface. It's how we've done the law in America so that we can keep the peace and we can make production, which was most important. Ron on Game On just 2 hours before, he was talking about this condition of the production. That we have to step up to protect that. It's only a few people that's supposed to be. It's like a farmer or a rancher. They have a multiple of at least 12 to 1. That's why we did it that way. It's really efficient. And so the people that could do that had that in them, the nature in them to go to the land and bring something forth from the land, provide for all of society. There's only 2% of them in the United States. And yet they're the ones that have and they also don't have a political voice. You can understand 2% of a population has no political voice. In this country, United States of America, that was supposed to not be subject to commerce. Commerce regulation, because it's only the man and woman on the land that knows best and does best by the nature of the business if I can call it the business of production. It's not really a business. It's simply producing raw materials. That you don't touch that in your society. That has been touched. It's the adulteration. That when you understand about that small segment of society, which the mining law allowed me to see, and of which, I guess, do I have to do a disclaimer? I'm one of them. I'm one of them. I'm dumb miners. I've got mining claims. We're trying to make a go of it. The expense and risk is on us. It's strict liability. There is no corporatism here. There's nothing like that. You have to do what you have to do, and you have to do it smart. And there's no one else that can do it but the guy or the woman that's there. Believe that. And any of you haven't done it, you need to go just do that just to see. It's not so simple. It's like a whole life's lesson, I suppose. But so we honor our producers, and I think we're going to start to re-straighten this out. Why I was able to point out to you, and again, it's not one over the other. We're screwed, folks, in this nation over the candidates we have. This reality worldwide wrestling game show we're watching. SCROOD for the ear sensitive, audio sensitive. We're screwed, folks. The answers that we get from Trump, as I identified last week, are wrong. Oh yeah, you can talk to someone's emotional anticipation of what they see wrong, but no one actually knows what to do or where to go do it to fix it. And I say no one advisedly. There are quite a few people that have an eyeball, but they're not in a seat of decision, and they're in a place where the majority of people are against them, and that's even in their own sphere of influence. As I would say, the microcosm of the miner is the macrocosm we know as America. What happens in the divisions and the stupidity and the ignorance and the arrogance and the lack of actual application of the narrow band of the law, the failure of that is the problem of the miners. That reflects out as well in every sector of a society that's supposed to toe that line, that narrow path of the law that's supposed to be respected, and essentially, as I focus our attention, to the producer class. You're not supposed to impose upon that class already working their tail off to do something that they're driven to do, actually. And maybe it's another sort of a subtle form of slavery as well, but it's like one you agree to. It's the voluntary servitude type. You just have to be a rancher. You just have to move rocks. You just have to grow cattle. I mean, it's just what you do, and you know to do it somehow. And that narrow class should never be beat down. I tell you, the Agenda 2030 tells you that production is what they want to control. And I told you they want to control your water last week. Now we see it's everywhere. There's probably, I got another report real quick, we'll touch it, that they want to attach to the stuff of the raw materials of your society. And that class is completely helpless. You have to understand that. Not that I feel helpless as a producer class. And we got many classes. Don't get me wrong. We all have our different hats as well as any judge might. But when you get into doing the producer class, you're already under it. It's already strict liability to you. You lose by your next decision. You lose by Mother Nature's next action to show you how puny you are. That class is what produces everything. Everything for you. Everyone that listens to a computer comes from the ground. Everything that's in that computer comes from what a miner somewhere does. That if they want to destroy the mine, they destroy the mine, or they start to destroy your society from its source. And that's why they went after your water. That's you. That's going after each nation now as we talk about this peace treaty we live in. So I really appreciated to hear the peace treaty idea about what we are really under when we look at society. And I'm just to say this, I've been kind of formulating my ideas on this anarchy and finding there's a lot of confusion around it, and a lot of it's being created by false understanding. And that anarchy is the failure to have this peace treaty among us, because there's a reality in the world. As much as I would like to see it be peaceful and unicorns and fairies and sprinkles and confetti, it's not that way. That's a shock. I guess that's what 30 years ago, that was my shock. I'm going along with my little cloud in my head, and I'm thinking I'm doing okay. I'm just doing my stuff. And then I get beat down, and then I get 5 cops decide that they haven't decided how they're going to shoot me and which one. And I'm saying, wait, hold it. I can only do one thing. Don't demand too many of them. So that's where I got it. That shocked that slapped the rose-colored glasses from my face over 3 decades ago. And I'm saying, what happened to, where was I? And where is that I thought was there that I could find? I can see it. I just can't get to it. And so then it's been 3 decades of understanding who's between me and you and where we could be. Where could we go? And we're so far away from that base understanding. It's really scary. If I think about it too long, I'll just give up, but I don't. There's something that says I can't give up. I don't know why. And like I said, maybe that's evidence of an eternal optimist. But we have it in us. And it's just getting this more correct look at the world on what the realities is, and look at to protect against the failures as best as we can. So just as this word goes out to the world, we got many different places. We're got a little bit of cleanup here for just what's going on this week, and some basic adjustments which shouldn't affect much of the listeners. But I told you we entered into the directory at TalkStream Live. They counted us down to the start of the broadcast, and I think we had at least one referral from there, so that was pretty neat. Whether or not people stay, I don't know, but they come. And we need places, so again, I'll ask you all that I don't do it so well. Those of you that know places that may be able to pick up the broadcast or maybe list the broadcast, that don't hesitate to let me know, markonthebeachhour.com, and I'll try and work out, get us there. So appreciate the management over at TalkStream putting us on, and who knows, I may have that listener here yet. One more, folks. One less cricket if that worked out. So, and many of the people that I got to say one other thing. The blogcaster, folks, it's just evidence. It's evidence of how you're going to, on certain issues, it's how you can compile stuff to go work in your favorite arena. No, it doesn't touch everything, but I can only do so much, and I just try to do packages of documents that'll prove certain concepts that you can use. And I don't see a lot of listeners listen to Behind the Woodshed. They don't go to the blogcaster. And so you're missing really a big part. And when I list the blogcaster, it's only what I think is immediate pertinent parts to the articles that I send you, which may have very big concepts. In fact, I was able to listen to Freaker's Balls to the Wall and Freaker's Ball this Friday on a podcast, and I heard Solomon, and he caught me, folks. He caught me where I was hoping y'all would catch me. And part of this is that delivery, and then part of it's also forgetting. when he brought up the idea of Noam Chomsky, bringing up when I brought and talked to you about the fact that he was saying it was malnutrition, you notice I hesitated a bit to embrace that, because there was something else I didn't get to in the article that you would have if you went to the Blogcaster and read it, that shows anomalies in even what he was saying, that I wasn't going to be ready to throw in completely that it was malnutrition, which Solomon down in Brazilistan, who's there in the region, even though he's now going to the dark side of the weather and the sun, the equinox for them, he was telling us that prior to GMOs, or manipulated crops, there was a much more balanced diet of the people than the tribes. And I would have to absolutely concur, and I didn't see all this stuff I can't get to. That actually concurs with what the dentist found out, and I just had the name and it just flew from my mind. Wow. I should just say this stuff, but see, it would be a jumble. There's a dentist that did research tribes, and he was wondering why all their teeth was really good and why you're all and weren't. And he found that their diets were really good. So I thank you for Solomon catching me. What I hope some of you do with the Blogcaster. Sometimes I don't fulfill the totality of what I want to say. It just doesn't come out, or I miss it, or there's a highlight that doesn't hold when I go to look. And he caught that little anomaly, but I wanted to point out I'm not buying into Noam Chomsky. He's another one of these characters on the stage you got to be very careful of. But I was offering them as all the different opportunities that would say it wasn't Zika-Zilla. Solomon very correctly brings up the fact, well, prior to modernization and civilization, people knew how to survive. They've done it for thousands and thousands of years. The dentist, and I apologize to his memory because he's a very fascinating guy to listen to and read, because it's a very important information about nutrition and essentially looking through your teeth to find out how we messed up in civilization. He found out that the tribes are much more healthier than we've been told. And so I want to thank Solomon for catching me on that discrepancy. And actually, it's a very important discrepancy to understand. As I tell you behind Woodshed, it's only a veneer that I can touch here. That there's so much more in that Blogcaster that I look at it and I say, I can't tell you how much flashes in my mind, all the information that goes through my mind that I just will never ever, even one story, maybe at times we'll never get to on numbers of broadcasts. So all the way from Brazilistan, someone listening very carefully is able to extract a very important point. I thank Solomon for doing that, and I'm asking you to do that. I don't have a problem, but having to tell you, well, I couldn't get to that. It's just not enough time. But to have you find that's pretty cool. So thank you very much, and thanks for tuning in, Solomon, and anybody else down in Brazilistan. Appreciate that, and watch out. I understand there's big riots and stuff. I hope you all just do what you need to do, but be careful, cautious on what all that's about. Interesting shucking jiving, isn't it? It doesn't matter where you live, folks. The people are crickets and under it. And then you see outside of the United States, boy, they can amass millions, can't they? How's that? And they say, well, how's that working for you all? Well, I don't know, folks. They're a little different dynamic. I've never lived in Brazil, never lived in the societies. I understand most of it's Portuguese speaking. I don't doubt that there's some Spanish as well and all the things, all kinds of stuff, but that's beyond me. I wasn't that capable to. I've been told I have it in me to be a linguist, but it doesn't. That never translated to what I ended up walking into. And I guess I put all that linguistic power in my legal law interpretation of what we're involved with. And again, I don't tell you anything I haven't really thought about or worked or experienced. To me, it's not an opinion what I tell you, and I try to give you every place that you can go to find it for yourself, and then you have to do the hard lifting to make it work for you. A lot of people don't want to do that. A lot of people want to make excuses. A lot of people take what I say in the bareness of it and condemn it. And it's certainly, people are finding out, those, again, like I said last week, people who have been listening to me for at least 10 years, who actually have their problems, when they finally get their problems, it all starts to make sense. And that's what I ask you, just engage. So another piece of news here, and it won't affect anybody who's not on worldtruth.org. It's going to go dark. WT will go dark on March 23rd, 2016. For those of you on the network, on the social network, please download and save what you need before the date. Before that date, recommend alternative sites in no particular order, or informedplanet.org, freedomsnetwork.com, and rabbitholeglobal.com. And so the nest is being shaken. Grammy Mary has been on record as to why, and like I said, I've been kind of there in a way, a different type of network, a different type of problem, but at some point it's enough, and you have to make that decision. And so we will be parting ways from there, but Freedom's Network, as I'm already on to Freedom's Network, there's not going to be any breaking of the broadcast as far as the where you can find it. I think we're still on Spreaker, and we're over at Freedom's Network, and we're certainly at reallibertymedia.com, so you can, and UCY. We're in lots of places that aren't changing. Those servers are staying as the whatever, again, and all you all that donated for that, that's still happening. So let's not worry about that. Just a transition going on by Wednesday, I think it is, whatever the 23rd is. New spring cleaning, folks. I suppose we can go there. So that's on tap for us to just keep track of. Don't want to here's my deal about this situation a bit, because I remember I came from Oracle Broadcasting. I had hundreds and hundreds of people that listened to me live. I had 1,000 or so that would come and download. I don't even get a fraction of that now. And it all happened at the transition. People went elsewhere. And so we don't want to lose many people. And people find us later and say, "Oh, where'd you go? I didn't know you were, I didn't know where you went." Well, they didn't look real close, but the point is we did lose quite a few people. I mean, lots and lots of people. So, big disappointment at that, but there's nothing more to do. And so it's not like going down the street and finding a cafe and keeping going in, and then because that cafe closed, you goes next door. That's not the internet. So, just want to let you all know we're still going to be here, that I understand, when World Truth closes. Freedom's Network already up. The other two I haven't checked out. Actually, a lot of the social networks, if you're tuned in right now, thank you very much. I'm not sure if I can handle many more. I found this morning the chats and all the networks and preparing for the broadcast is way a lot. So I think I've reached my limit on all that. But so I think that's all the news current right now that I can think of to tell you. And I thank you very much for hanging in there on all that. I found it very interesting here in, United States is supposed to be the white knight, and what we're all supposed to be doing and what we allow to ourselves. And I told you, I've given you some suggestions of what to do with, against the policy makers, against the brutality. Caught my interest here, and you just get a link. It just goes to Press TV video. Paris marks International Day Against Police Brutality. Did you see any big Occupy for the contrary to police brutality, or did you see people making the Worldwide Wrestling Roadshow of Trump hit the news yesterday? Understand there's a global police brutality, international. That's the military force upon you, folks, everywhere. So this is what affects you locally, affects everybody. What you do locally ripples out and affects everybody. That Paris, who has a big problem apparently with their people really fired up, they give themselves one day of the people to demonstrate. Otherwise you can't. You get beat down by the cops and brutalized by the cops every other day in Paris. But I found it fascinating what they won't tolerate down there that the United States of America does. Big police brutality protests on International Day against police brutality in France because the cops there kill 15 people a year, ranging from 9 to 69 or something like that. Behind the Woodshed, you listen to the news in Real Liberty Media or Freaker's Ball or Balls to the Wall. The World Truth, Freedoms. You listen to all this, you realize the joke that is. But this is, in fact, they're already rioting at 15 to 1. Where's all y'all in America? We're up to 1,000 a year. How much are we accepting that is just not supposed to be, folks? And it's the problem that we have that I talked to you behind the Woodshed, that was the license when they told you you have a republic if you can keep it. Because we're going to come in here, we're giving ourselves license to come here and waylay you and do the plunder. We'll do the plunder dance all over your head. You think over time it'd get better, but it doesn't, and that's the point. You see the fact of non-resistance to the oppression. I laughed a bit. It's not funny. Well, I felt guilty, actually. 15 people die in France a year just to police brutality. It's recognized as police brutality. It's not recognized as some excuse. I feared for my life. And we are crickets to 1,000 or more, over 1,000. I think we're 1,100 now a year. United States cops. Okay, there's a population difference. Who cares? One was too many, folks. But anyway, it's on the Paris is having a big deal. Yesterday, didn't know why I didn't hear too much about it for the United States of America and why we're going to allow it. It's pretty interesting. Another interesting thing that came across the boards, you may have all heard about it, that Putin orders the main part of the Russian army out of Syria as peace talks resume. Fascinating and surprise move. There's a lot that we can say about this, but they know what's going on. I can just tell you that the earmarks of backroom dealings, deep secret dealings are all over this. Brilliant move, also. Puts lots of pressure in lots of places. He doesn't close the door to come back in. In fact, what people are missing is nothing that Russia had before when they pulled out is gone. It's all there. They actually have the S-400s. They're thinking about maybe where they're going to remove those missile systems that protect as a shield over Syria. So those things can fire up at any time. But Syria is now placed in a position of decision in the peace talks. They've gotten the so-called moderate rebels that will to re-assimilate into Syria so they can get back to their elections coming up in a month. But this was a fascinating, if you look at it, a chess game. This was a brilliant chess move in my state. I hear lots of people they're questioning it. I think this was brilliant. Very, very astute look at what's going on. I absolutely embrace what they told us they do. They look at everybody's position and they truly, deeply analyze it. And when they finally come up with a solution, it meets everybody's stated objectives. They somehow make the matrix up that figures out how everyone's going to come into consistency with a plan that will work. This is really an example of what I would have thought of in the past when I was growing up, was what we heard our statesmen did. Our statesman did. A statesman does this. Statesman goes out and represents the state in the peaceful nature to try and work it out always. What we found out the truth was totally different. We go around, as far as the United States, and pounding on everybody, beating it up, because we're just that big brute. We're the big anarchist. We're the biggest thing around, and it takes someone bigger or as big to stop us. And then, as you see, this little treaty thing came down, apparently. There's something behind the scenes on this big, big deal. I don't know if you noticed, I know there's lots of strife going on. But all of a sudden now, lots of pivots started happening between Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and I'm not playing music, Qatar, I guess it is, Turkey. There's still some Kurdish problems, but, if you listen very carefully, there's a whole lot of swinging going on. And I'm not talking music now either. That this move, a surprise, he just starts pulling his stuff out right at the peace talks. It really did a dynamic change, which I thought I feel it's brilliant, and we'll see. Again, you can only go as far as the criminal will want to agree to not come against you. So, I didn't see that Putin has left anything out that they can't come back in and continue where they left off. They certainly showed the United States up if the United States thought it was doing something. If there wasn't this ulterior motive of using us as this straw man, who may have people in it that believe they're going to make a caliphate, but they're being used as they need to be used as a tool created by Zio West. And Putin came in, and I think he's been brilliant. Not to sound like I'm embracing Russia. This is the dynamic stage that we watch that's in the world. And I think United States of America would have been well better off to go ahead and move this way than what we have been. And so, interesting. Like I said, there's more and more coming on. We could talk about, all this stuff will be in the broadcast. You can find it as I'm talking. That's not one of those stories, I guess, that you have to look in too much more than the news will tell you. And you can dig in past the news, there's a lot more going on. But this is the world stage, and this is where we kind of why I say look at the world stage, and it reflects back to where you are. It doesn't matter where you are. It reflects back that also something came up at this very time where the question of Bitcoin may be. The central banks beat Bitcoin at own game with rival super currency. This is back to global control, digital currency. I told you this a long time. It looks like Bitcoin was brought on to allow digital currencies. And trackable currencies. At the time, that wasn't really understood they were trackable, but now it's pretty clearly that they are. What is now eventuated, I think I hear, if I understand this, and I don't know that I do, there's this system called Ethereum, and it's supposed to make what they call like true contract and enforcement using these digital blockchains. So I'm just watching the fall. It's coming, folks. They've set it up. Whether or not you buy into this super currency will be up to you. But this is what the major players are looking at this. They didn't denounce it. They realized it was going to need to be embraced. I think it was brought on to do so, but the central banks are claiming to be Bitcoin. They beat Bitcoin, but this is all the independent. This is like voting with your dollars, if you will. Computer scientists have devised a digital cryptocurrency in league with the Bank of England that could pose a devastating threat to large tranches of financial industry and profoundly change the management of monetary policy. I won't read on and on. Just understand this is working in the world. I'm kind of, the verdict is out for me on digital money. To me, it's just another tool. I would say be wise with it. Have some, maybe understand the system. You have to understand a whole new thing, but understand that if you're going to get involved. But don't put your eggs in one basket there for sure. I think that's a pretty fair view. This little article goes through and explains how this is going to be done. The World Bank, if you will, the monetary controllers are jumping in. So they're going to, as I told you a long time ago, and I think this was also given to me, this knowledge that was known in the world from Hernando de Soto, a Geneva-trained economist who wrote The Mystery of Capital. He was saying that, and this is not maybe known to him, but this is where I think I received this information from him, was that it's understood that when you have an outlaw, you don't go against that outlaw. And this is reality, folks. This is what happens in the world. This is not how you make it up, what term you call it, whatever. This is what happens in the world. If you disregard an outlaw, the odds are very high that that outlaw will rise up enough to destroy you. And so the wisdom is figure out the outlaw, embrace the outlaw so you can regulate the outlaw. And you embrace the outlaw by making an offer he can't refuse. And in a way you could see this in the mining law with the miners. The miners had governments when they were outlaws to the government itself. And what did the Congress do? And because some law decisions came down about the actual relationship of the government, not the one that we're swallowing today, but the real one, was that they could not stop these outlaws making their own government and doing what land was meant to be used for. And so the government made a mining law. It wasn't quite exactly embracing the outlaw, but it embraced the outlaw's laws in order to be able to so-called regulate it. In this case, the regulation was making regular the way you make the claim to acquire it. It wasn't a regulation like on commerce. It was more the disposition of soil. It's a little different, but this is a known thing in the world. You embrace what looks to be an outlaw. In other words, it's out-civilized. It's not brought into you. If it's acting outside of you, it can rise up, and it will most likely rise up and destroy you. That you look in every capacity, and this is what I think Russia does, to embrace even the stuff you think you don't like. You figure out how to embrace it, because once you embrace it, then it's within the specter of your control, and you've gotten the consent of those that you've embraced. And you have to offer them a deal they can't refuse. So this is coming. This is right on almost on cue in a way, although when they were able to float this thing past 2008, I realized there was nothing I was going to keep up with that they can't fix. The fix is in, as we were actually said in the chat room before. So central banks are going to embrace the Bitcoin. You can too. But I would ask you to be very careful, because this is all coming underneath that world plan that if you don't have one, you've lost. If you better have your own plan. My thought is to embrace the plans that worked before for property, and then we can throw these guys out. And it just takes more and more people to do so. Again, the microcosm of the miner, my disappointment. The miners have decided to go to someone who is in the agenda to defeat them instead of using the law to kick them out. To beat down the oppression and the occupation. People have no clue, really. And I have an insight, I think. And I tell you, as you keep working with it, engaging it, you learn more. And that's the only way I can tell you that it needs to happen. So I also talked to you on the world stage. You're looking at the UN influence and the basic necessities. They're going after water. I've told you that last week. It's not because I explain it to you. You know that. But this is just natural law. You don't have water, you're not going to last long. You don't have air, you're going to last a lot less. So came up right after the last week's broadcast that there's 50 more states, I think they were saying here. That's kind of all of them. I don't have the number here to tell you, but the tests for cities and rural subdivisions and even schools and daycares serving water to 6 million people around the country have been found excessive and harmful levels of lead. And I'll bet that's not the only thing. All I want to remind you is this, as I told you, I was predicting, as soon as Flint fell, the rest was coming, like Fukushima. As soon as they blamed everything on Fukushima, I told you they were hiding, they were using that as the mythical scapegoat. And also on the Blogcaster, I don't know what I'm going to put on the Blogcaster except the content and what I'm going to describe it as. When I go back, I have a moment to think of a title to head off all these content breaks. And that's what came up. Sometimes I kind of chuckle at what I come up with. Maybe you don't like, maybe it's not funny to you or whatever. I mean, not funny, but to me, there's a different insight that I have after the broadcast when I went, what did I talk about? How do I describe that? And I only have a few words to make that. So the titles also will tell you in the Blogcaster. And this one had to do something about using mythical creatures called the scapegoat. That this is what's going on. I told you I could predict that we're going to start finding literally unpotable water across the nation, and no one cared. They've been hiding it. So here's a report. You can get it. You get the evidence. For those of you that may be in jurisdictions that are closer, ones that want to avoid this problem, you have now a piece of evidence that when you walk into someone and nicely, diplomatically, and politely talk to them, you're not a lunatic. We haven't made in this point and where we are in this time, we haven't made your life an ongoing court case. Bringing evidence wherever you go that's not just opinion, not fabrication, not unsubstantiated when someone looks critically at it. Like I've told you, a lot of these court cases with briefs and stuff citing laws, in particular for the worst offenders are the right to drive petition complaints. Absolutely just useless. But so you got to bring information that's credible, and this is how I just tell you experientially we're killing them behind the scenes when these newfound newbies in government think that their authority, because their employment and their title is more important than the substantial right to you have to property or your private property. Their opinions about your stuff reign supreme, and that the burden is on you now to prove to the contrary of their authority. You have to go and find it now. You're gonna have to work to change this as well, because that's a felony trespass for them to do that right up front. But you can put that on them and say, listen, you just made a claim I know you can't back up. So I'm going to bring you one piece of evidence to show the probable cause that you're wrong. Then I'm going to put on you the necessity to bring how you were right. And I'm going to tell you that if you impose this burden on me, and I'm going to hand this to you, and you are found to be wrong, and then you can't show how you are right, that's a felony. And so you think long and hard before you take your employment with the government to overcome what I have is inherent to me, and a right that you don't have a right to trespass by the color of your authority. Now, I just said a whole bunch right there. You need to go back and listen and write that down. That is where we're going. That's what we're doing right now. And these people that are in authority cannot answer to that. And it is a felony. I keep telling you, go find this stuff. You don't talk to them like yelling at them like they're criminals. You always give them 2 or 3 chances to avoid becoming trapped by their ignorance. A lot of it's ignorance. That's why I don't get too uppity at the point of the initial contacts, and there might be a couple. That certainly starts to dissolve quickly when you find out that they're going to maintain that agenda notwithstanding anything you show them. That's a real criminal right there. That becomes more, you better start understanding that you better have your big boy and big girl pants on, or dress if you wear. Maybe the kilt, we can kind of cross-gender kilts. We'll wear kilts now. So this is what we're up against, that these people in government think they have a right before you, and in fact they have the obligation to watch out that they don't trespass you. And as soon as we get this new rationale worked out, and we still become respectful to ourselves by communicating with each other, even despite these conditions, we give ourselves the example of how we want the future to actually be. And we are practiced. We start habitualizing that ourselves, and it's a good habit. We need good habits. Not habit trails, but habits. So the truth starts to come out as you resist, as you confront, as you engage, evolutionary engagement behind the woodshed. Make the switch, folks. Talk about this on my Twitter. Just make the switch. Typically it's the one you can be beat with. You make your own switch, but no, make the switch to becoming evolutionary engaged. This is what I bring. I bring new engagement wherever we go with the people I help. I'm asking you to start thinking the way I am, to bring your own. I can't be everywhere, and you can be where you are. But if you see something that's defeated you, it means that you weren't evolutionary in your engagement. Because it seems to me wherever I go, now given that the government isn't wrong, I mean, it's not everywhere are they wrong. They're just kind of deceitfully wrong. You got to find that. And once you find it, that's the evolutionary game that comes as a collateral side attack. It's a side attack to them. They never see it coming. As I told you before, part of the, it was a necessity and more than anything else. This is a war, and a necessity comes up very quickly. In our court case, the incompetent officers in an incompetent court attempted to hijack our case. We had to have a tool to stop that. And so we came collateral to what they ever seen before. It was always there, it's just never been used in that way. And this is what you'll see. Those of you that are so-called patriots, looking at patriot answers, you'll wonder why the first one worked and none of them worked after that. That's why. Because it's this collateral attack that beats them. And if you understand that, you don't go after small stuff. You collateral attack and surprise them on the big stuff. And they're defenseless to that at least the first time. And if you do it right, they can't come after you at all after that. But if you do it menial stuff, like I used to go and find the set-asides of pre-plea remedy and avoidance. It was in the statutes written. They didn't talk about they talked about a set-aside. They didn't talk about a pre-plea remedy. They wouldn't tell you about all that because there's more than this one. The tickets that the right has under statutory law for due process purposes are supposed to be conforming to a certain time period to get you in to appear. And I noticed they were continually writing these tickets outside that time. So I wrote set-aside papers for many years, or encouraged people to use them, and we'd have the tickets set aside. They go away because they're not sufficient as due process law, which showed me at least that much of due process works despite the corruption. Well, guess what happened? After 2 years, the legislature came in and extended that time. That's a small time victory. We got a whole lot more than one win out of it, but they eventually changed the time to go to instead of 14 days to 32 days. And so that paperwork and that remedy got fixed. And that's when I realized, and this is what you have to be considerate, and I've been talking to people about this in the last week or so, reminding myself of these lessons I've learned, is that you have to be careful about being too smart for yourself, that you give them the answers of where the loopholes are, they'll plug the loophole, now you don't have it. And now you've engaged them and you continue engaging them, and pretty soon the noose gets tighter and tighter, and you're doing it. It's done by your struggle. So you have to take away that rope. You actually have to knock them off of their point. So I stopped writing that interesting little technical wins, because eventually the legislature fixes that hole, and then it's not available to you, and now you are stuck. Because now you've been claiming that they are somebody the whole time. So the evolutionary engagement part is to understand the system sufficiently to address it in ways it can't address you, or that it can't exist in the status that they've created to address you. And you make the record for that. Is that a silver bullet? No, there are no silver bullets in a world where we live in a world of war, that we all tenuously live amongst ourselves with a tacit treaty of peace. I'm going to say it one more time. In a treaty of peace, there is a victor, whether you understand this or not, and it's the one that could eventually prevail. And that's agreed to by the parties. And I'm just going to tell you that in the treaty of peace of societies, for the people living amongst themselves, it's evil. It's this fallen nature in us, and maybe beyond. But at least our fallen nature is the victor in this, why we have these treaties of peace. And I'm only saying, as I'm thinking about that, I'm only saying that I'm trying to get us past this nonsense of discussion and arguing which is better and what's not better. There's a reality. We better address it. The utopia can come, but I think once we get the thing working better, we're going to notice that there wasn't some things that were so bad. It's that the things that we didn't have as solid checks and balances were what we really started to see problematic. Is that there was, when we first saw the first employee of the government say that we have immunity, that should have been beat down. That fire should have been doused, drowned, and set in a pool and sealed off, and it wasn't. And so now you see slowly, incrementally, the military industrial complex gets immunities everywhere you look. And those are all not lawful. It doesn't matter by whatever decision, because once you make enough, you lift enough tie downs, enough limitations, you now are not a limited form structure, are you? Or at least the ones working the system are not. So, evidence is your life is this ongoing criminal case against us. And until we get that straightened up, I just don't see it's a war against us until we prosecute that war, literally prosecute that war, figure out the evolutionary engagement, some of the things I bring here behind the woodshed for you. And you'll find there's others. I mean, I'm not the sole repository for this stuff. I look around and I enter into new territory. I find new ones. It's kind of fascinating what's sitting there. But you have to engage. You have to persist against, and there's going to be attacks sometimes. I know we want to all not attack. We all want to all be quiet. We do want to be peaceful for the most part. But the reason the fact that you're even thinking about it shows you that reality says we're not. And so we got this additional thing that goes on in the world, that people trying to convince you for the buy-in. And I brought up we've been bringing up information on someone comes and attacks you, how to best address it. Well, there's been and what that might mean in the larger context with government, authority, corporations inside offices that are making decisions for this industry of the corporations. That wasn't stopped either, so that keeps on, that plunder keeps going. More evidence of a greater world, I suppose, and that what you're looking at is a corruption, an adulteration of the system. Thou shalt not commit adultery. That you need to fix or work toward, but at least you can now work toward it with where you may be effective, and in this case, the indirect effect is that you realize what you've been told about these scientists who go against GMO may not deserve your money on the production side. The scientists are now being found, or at least this one is being found to be correct. Scientists who discovered GMOs cause tumors in rats wins landmark defamation lawsuit in Paris. This is not proving GMOs, okay? So let's not go that far. But someone lied on him in a defamation suit, in a defamatory way. He engaged it and he won. Whatever they said about him was defamation. Essentially, they lied on him, bared false witness to the rest of the world. And the thing about defamation is you got to find the people that agree, that believe that statement that you vilified somebody before you can even win. So I told you before, these defamation cases are not so easy. I think I read off, there's like 8 different defenses against it. Being stupid is one of them. So you figure out all the holes that these rats can go climbing out of, whether or not they've got a tumor on their belly. But a court has ruled the French professor Gilles Eric Seralini was correct when he concluded that GM food, when fed to rats, caused serious health problems, including tumors. I won't read any more. You can go get to the blogcaster. You can type this up as you're listening to me if you're on the internet, unless all y'all doing spring cleaning and moving the crickets out. That's cool. Maybe do it a little bit later. That this Seralini scientist, and I listened to a video, he seems absolutely right on what he's doing. Not because he's finding out that GMOs causes problems. I don't care if they don't cause problems. They might be good, but right now there's some real fundamental problems with them that have never been answered, that this guy sounds like he's really in the right frame of reference as a scientist. I'm looking to qualify him as well. Well, you can't speak bad about him, and if you do, he'll sue you for defamation and he'll win. And so we get the first inklings that the industry and the science peers and the publications weren't so cool about what they said about him. And in fact, what he did was at least scientific. What it means, that could be something else. It's kind of like the coincidence. Yeah, everyone denies a coincidence. I believe they exist. The fact that the coincidence that you're listening to me is that coincidence. Whether or not you listen to me, you might hear me, but whether or not you're listening, and whether or not you do anything, and whether or not that has meaning, that's a whole different thing. But the coincidence of my voice in your ear hole is a fact. And so, we now see there's defamation in what was being claimed against this scientist, and doesn't necessarily mean that GMOs are any worse, but it certainly shows that his scientific method to show that those tumors at least were on the rats was not what they were mischaracterized to be by others. So here we are, the mischaracterization of things is what I've been telling you about, the mischaracterization of production with that of commerce is this same defamation, if I can say it that way. So you see consistencies if we go through the news, the notice that they're telling us you can do this, and I'm not so keen that he had to go to these courts of so-called just us, but he did, and he did prevail. And so, most people won't be involved. Most people will try to avoid being involved. Most people will accept being violated and not being involved. But for those of you that want to engage, don't take heart. This is another example that you look at what that happened in that case, what they said. You look at very clearly what they were saying, and you work out when someone comes against you to defame you because now you're bringing the law. You know what they did to win in another case. You can put that to your use. Breaking, big food giant guilty of money laundering in GMO labeling stunt. Hiding contributors, donors against GMO labeling. So this is essentially what your donation, your lobbying laws coming to bear. Those are there and available. A landmark case about dirty money in politics that go into keeping big food and big biotech afloat was just decided. Judge Ann Hirsch awarding a summary judgment in a suit brought against the Grocery Manufacturers Association by Attorney General Bob Ferguson, finding the GMA guilty of money laundering scheme that shields members identities as they help to defeat Washington's 2013 GMO labeling ballot initiative I-522 with their donations. Okay, so this is a nesting problem. They go through and explain how this works. This is something now you can look at your own government set up just like this, and you can see how this, they use public funds, so-called. But anyway, so this is something that you can use. I'm on record. The labeling was not a good idea. The way that, see, what people didn't understand, and we caught this, and I did do an interview a long time back, I think it must have been on Oracle, with the woman who also she found out, she wasn't even anybody read in the law, she found out how they were utilizing industry attorneys to write the law to get to be voted, which exempted 80% of the market. So a labeling law that's written like that is not one for a people, that's for sure. It's certainly the one that's like, again, the TPP or TPIP. This is special written. So why these people did this is, in a way, is kind of mind-boggling. Why they fed the other side when they actually had the law they needed has always confused me a bit, even about California. But they got caught. So you don't like GMOs and you want to see these. First of all, I would say you got to have a labeling law that says label all GMO goods. Period. No exemptions. Nothing. Then I might agree with the labeling law. Otherwise, when you do bring your labeling law, those of you that step up to that part and going into that part of what we have available to stop the consent of the crime against us with regards to these feeds. Would be to attack them for their funding source. Remember, follow the money. And there's certain disclosures that have to be made. So most of you all know about this, so I don't really talk. I mean, as I think about it, I say, you know about this, why am I talking? But we're not using it. I guess I talk about it because here it is. Maybe you didn't quite get that. You can use this stuff. This is not just about GMOs. This is about any legislation. Believe me. We saw enough of this in 2013. That's like I said, I'm not going to do that again. So you're going to hear only about 2013 from me for probably a long time. That's my experience. What I saw in there was enough for the rest of my life. And so that's going to be the experiential thing until someone says, well, you're full of nonsense. You don't know what you're talking about. The money, the donors, the backdoor dealing, all that stuff's real. They don't care. They don't care to follow the law. Well, they care only as much to see how much resistance they get if they're going to disregard the law. That's what they're looking for. That's why producers are kind of at a disadvantage. They can never make the numbers actually that make it look like something. That's why everyone that can go to Jefferson Mining District's petition and click send the message, send the petition, send them a message, folks. That's one more that such a small amount of people, that's a big, large magnifying effect. And you get to say, but I'm only a producer and I don't have a political voice. And you're still stealing my stuff under color of authority. That's a felony. You don't have that right. If you don't make that statement, they win, folks. They just take it. Not even a win. They just run you over. You become this roadkill in history. That's it. Shocking study suggests millions of kids did misdiagnose as having ADHD because of their age. Right after the broadcast, a lot of health things came up I wanted to kind of hit right here with this GMO. This kind of led to this story, the study of misdiagnosis ADHD. Remember, we were talking about even AIDS. You look at the inner wrapper, folks. I recommend that you go and look at the sheet, the data sheet that comes with all these, whatever the food is. We need a data sheet for our feed anymore, folks. If they're going to do that, that's the labeling law, then so be it. Then, it's going to cost money. Yeah, well, I'm going to be dead with tumors if I don't. So, the AIDS, if you look at the wrapper, it was really a subjective clinical diagnosis. And now that kind of gets us over to psychiatry. They just made this stuff up anyway. This report says shocking study. I don't know why it's shocking. Behind the Woodshed, we've been talking like this forever. Well, forever since we've been talking. A shocking study suggests millions of kids misdiagnosed as having ADHD because of their age. More evidence, folks, to bring for those of you that are really wondering what this thing you think is government certifications and licenses, that you think that means it's to be a high level of care. It's not. It's the ability to do a certain amount of ethical crime. That's all licenses are. Okay, so this is what's being underwritten. They make this stuff up. They make a place of plunder for themselves, and they're in like Flint, Michigan, or they're in like ticks, and you're not. It's a lot of work to get a tick out, and it leaves a scar, folks. It's common knowledge the United States has unusual dependency on prescription medications, highlighted by the current epidemic of opioid overdoses in adults. Children, too, have experienced this astronomical rise in particular kind of medication that used to treat attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. I may even have that if I can't spell what I'm reading it, folks. Pharmaceutical industry found a gold mine, let's go claim that, in developing drugs to modify behavior in children. Folks, if that isn't a crime all of its own, I don't know. According to the documentary, The Drugging of Our Children, between 1995 and 2000, the number of psychotropic drugs prescribed to kids doubled each morning. More than 6 million children are given prescription medications before going to school, such as Ritalin and other amphetamines. As they said, that's what they were already fixing the economy on. They're maintaining the economy on Ritalin. Remember, we just heard all this drug. They put the war on drugs. They flooded the nation everywhere with drug. You are being affected by that. The diagnosis of ADHD is notoriously subjective. There we are again. There's the word. It was right in those inserts on that aid. See, and there's other ones we read too. Also, the vaccines, they tell you they'll cause death. So read the inserts there. But we're finding out that the world isn't what it is. There's a shocking study. I don't know if it's shocking, folks. When are you going to start taking this information, know the reality? Stop making excuses, and let's get, for those of you that are passionate about this, engage it. Here's another piece of evidence to show you this thing. You can go read it for yourself and get the study and then extrapolate from there. So I guess that'll again, harm, folks. It's fabricated harm on that. So if you got a stuffy nose and you start washing your feet, and that's not correlative, then you're gonna have a stuffy nose and maybe some clean feet, but your nose stays stuffed. If you think that stuffy nose is caused by something in your blood, so you start cutting your arteries to drain out some of that which is harming you, you may not exist very long. So you got to really understand what the cause and effect of things is, and if it's all fabricated and made up, or you think it's real and it isn't, like I hear lots of people addressing the reality that we live in the society today, and it ends up being the wrong response, it's because you've analyzed the condition incorrectly. And so here's a so-called shocking study that explains that what you've been told may not be, and it may be caused by something that you haven't been told about, even though you kind of know. Another connection closer. The new mind control. I found this fascinating. If this is the story I'm thinking it is, wow. Talk about, I won't get too deep in subliminal advertising and that kind of stuff, but wow, at least suggestions. What they can do now to you without you even knowing it is just fascinating to me. How malleable we are. These sentient creatures that we think we are, and part of it's we don't become, we stifle that sentience. I think for automaticity, we do turn into that human that they're trying to mold so they can feed us, and we have nothing more to say. They can treat us instead of caring, but treat us. They can diagnose us and feel important. They can do all kinds of stuff to us. And you feel helpless against it. It's in your mind. The battle for the mind control, though, is a different issue. How the internet has spawned subtle forms of influence that can flip elections and manipulate everything we say, think, and do. If you're going to enter into this ballot or law-making type of thing to try and tame the beast as you can, because that's the way your mind works and that's the way your talents guide you, you have to understand you're up against this outward other thing. And it's not that it's, you shrug your shoulders and walk away. It's just another thing you end up having to deal with. And if you are passionate and persistent, you prevail against it. I think I've seen that in most everybody. And sometimes it's a pretty steep mountain. I mean, like, I've been doing this thing for 10 years. What we've been doing, and we're not even close to being done. And it's looking like maybe we may never get done in my lifetime. But somehow I'm going to keep persisting, because I never know that tomorrow could be that, literally, could be that the light actually starts to shine. And a lot of it sometimes is just a lot of all you all telling you all, the rest of all you all, and we start coming together to do these things. Robert Epstein is a senior research psychologist at the American Institute of Behavioral Research and Technology in California. He is the author of 15 books and a former editor of Chief Psychology Today. This article is a preview of the forthcoming book, The Mind Control. What they explain, if I'm again remembering, they go through quite a bit of a setup just in this explanation. But they essentially show us how when you're doing your searches and Google has control over the outcome, they went in and did an experiment that showed that you cannot tell whether or not the results that you're getting, wherever you look on the internet actually, and what you're given, you cannot tell whether it's real or fabricated. And even those that, and the serious, really, the serious exposure of our frailties is that even when you had an inkling that the results were being altered, you actually were worse in your agreement with what you were told, fraudulently or wrongly, than had you not known. And this is another psychological dynamic. It's like you get the worst, absolute worst liberal. When you show the light on them, they'll jump, instead of finding some place that's rational, they'll jump back way over to the right, and they'll go headlong into that direction. This was like a sales thing I found a long time ago. People that are absolutely adamant against what you have, if you can convince them, they become almost your biggest salesman, or they sell it themselves, or the biggest proponent for what you have. It's an interesting dynamic in the psychology of people. That with Google owning the internet, and I understand now I think it was this article that tells us that Yahoo now is contracting services for search engines. The results are modified, and that you can't tell, and even if you can tell, you're actually a worse victim to it, that they can sway to a large degree the election response of people just through Google. Here's my problem, is that if you missed it, maybe you didn't, but I'm going to say it again, and you didn't realize that. Now go back to what we go back. I tell you, we live in a militarized world, and why the Google guy now went into the DOD. That's an obvious experiment, folks. This has been running on us for a long number of generations. In fact, I think I see stuff. I think I was right before some of it, but I'm wondering how much was even gotten to me. The little guy standing in front of a TV that was bigger than me at times, if I remember that right. All the images that were learned to do then. This is certainly after the 50s, when they started to learn about how they could program you. So what didn't I escape is always a question in my mind. The Protocols of Elders of Zion was, what don't I know about myself that they're manipulating me with? It was a devastating insight. I just tell you again, it was truly devastating to understand that. It was like this. Talk about your utopia being blown out, but it was at a fundamental root foundation that you are known better than you. So, for the word to the wise, these and it may be answering why we see the World Wrestling Federation on stage of the elections now. It's completely almost predictable. The reality show that goes on here. It's almost, we're helpless to it in a way. It's scary to think that I could be looking, and I mean, I'm cognizant of these things. Okay, why am I only getting those results? And I have like 3 or 4 search engines I use just to see if I can get away from some of the programming. Well, some results aren't what I'm looking at. I go, why am I getting those? So I know that, I can tell. But to know that that's actually working on you over time, that's just like I said, it's subliminal suggestion, and that there's a scientific experiment that shows a high probability and likelihood of you shifting based on this repeated exposure. Almost answers a lot of the problems that we see and why you don't see too much change more than the same direction, and why people are crickets. And that's why I say at one level I'm not judgmental about the crickets. It's really more of a condition we have to stop. We have to stop being that cricket just because we have to. How we're going to do that may be very, very difficult when you see this kind of a study. It was actually mind-blowing to see the numbers and the experiment and how they worked it out and what they say is going on behind the scenes about this. So you can get that in the blogcaster. Do not believe what you see. New technology alters facial expressions in real time was the cutting-edge content that came this morning that was piggybacks on that. They've got technology now that in real time in television, you cannot tell that the reality didn't happen. Now, I've not seen evidence of this. I didn't have time to do it. But again, what we see, our witness is so puny. It's so inaccurate. As I talked to you about that before on jury duty, our witness is so inferior that they now have the ability, they're telling us the technology exists, and the notice they give to us, that in the future you can be someone like anonymous sitting behind a mask, and they'll give you Donald Trump's face. You'll be reading from a script. You won't even know it because it'll be all like we call it CGI now, but it'll be much different technology. In real time, facial expressions will change, notwithstanding whatever the model did. Do not believe what you see. New facial technology alters facial expressions in real time. Did you know that every political leader on stage and on television could be totally generated by computer? Through the use of a computer vision and pattern recognition, CVPR, real-time facial expressions can be manipulated by anyone. Companies across the globe are rushing to get their hands on this technology because no longer does an individual have to read a script in front of a camera or use a teleprompter. It can all be done by computer-generated image without a person even being in front of the camera. Now, I'm thinking this is almost like a leading-edge story that may or may not actually be possible. What I'm telling you is I think the technology is there to do this, even if it is on just an idea. I almost got the feeling this was like an onion, but I know the technology is there that it isn't. So, not to diminish this. This now leads us over, and I don't want to get into it, just to mention anything you've seen in video in the last 10 years, if this is coming out now, they had it 10 years or so ago, maybe longer, 15 years ago, and that brings up these issues about the 911 things, the 9/11, about what we saw. And a couple of video instances where you can, if you look at analyze the video, technically analyze the video, you see technological artifacts that sit there to explain that this is manipulated imagery in real time. So when you're looking at a face on the TV, you may not be seeing the actual face. And understand that this technology that can manipulate the face will be being put on your robots. So that when you talk to them, you think they're real as well. And one little video I just recently saw, they asked him, would you kill humans? And the robot said, well, yeah, well, I'll do that. And he says, no. But there it is. They just throw that out there. They get our visual witness to be conforming to what we perceive as reality. Our witness is not worth 2 cents. It's certainly not worth our 2 cents. But here it is, right on the building of this. Our witness to the world is being controlled at every turn, certainly taking technology to do so. The technocracy rising, I think of Patrick Wood, this is kind of building into that. It's the tool. This is a real boon to these people. And so, just be aware. You could be looking at something totally generated, and I assume, to my mind, it's not quite real time quite yet, to my mind. I don't have access to a bunch of real sophisticated stuff that you might see, but corporatism has the money to get real time, and I wouldn't doubt that it may be close if it's not actual. Because for some reason I'm still able to see how images are adulterated. If I can't, I may have to see it a few times, but there's something that tells us there's something not quite right with the image we just saw. When they get rid of that, that's going to be the day that, together with the prior Google experiment, will be the day that you can watch your societies go wherever those with that power move it. People are going to prison thanks to DNA software. How it works and is secret. And this is another thing, the witness that we have, the evidence in our lives against us. As I keep telling you, you know, everyone wants to say, it doesn't matter if the government gets a hold of my stuff because I don't do anything and all that other stuff, and I just want to stick it in their face anyway. That's okay for as long as they're not after you. When they are, I told you we found out the FBI will fabricate evidence, as in the example of the guy having his fingerprints taken 24 hours before, that his fingerprints were placed on a rap sheet evidence of 30 or so years before by the FBI, and then sent back to the court as evidence that he was involved in a crime 30 years before. And if it wasn't for the guy being astute as to time and chronology, and that maybe 17 days into his life, that document was supposedly created 17 days after his birth, that he could not commit the crime that his big fingerprints were sitting on, that maybe that evidence was really a crime on the court. If you're not able to do that, you now know that the government works on the secret DNA software that you can't look into. This is the proprietorship problem, that attorneys that are defense attorneys see the problem. How do we know that it's actually taking this DNA information that's gathered, which is not yet proven either, and has a lot of trouble and problems. If you were reading last week's submission to the Blogcaster about this evidence that's fabricated, that they get you to believe on TV as CSI, solve the crime, do the time, that they can't really differentiate certain DNA strands from different people, not even being able to differentiate the hair, even looking at a hair from a dog and people, that this false evidence that we create and allow is going to play a greater and greater role as we move into more and more totalitarian type conditions. That at least if you understand that it's there, you have the word in your mouth to challenge it for the very types of reasons that you should. Again, you have to have evidence that you can trust. That's part of the rules of evidence. The more you understand what I'm saying here, as we move into these things, the more you get to apply with people in government. You can apply these at everybody. It doesn't have to be court. You apply these rules of evidence and all this, wherever you go, you take on a whole different persona, if I can say it that way. You take on a whole different bearing. You speak in a different matter, and there's nothing that you're saying that's not on point and provable. That way you just decimate whoever you come against if they come contrary to that reality, truth, or law. Now, what they do is behind the scenes. It's like who knows the software on the election results is the same problem as DNA software for people that are convicted for DNA. How many people, I mean, this really fries me. I can't really read them too often. How many times have I brought you these cases where men were in jail, or even women, 30, 35 years, and it wasn't them? Because this evidence is given a higher status and not challenged at every point. Even the software wasn't challenged, and they're telling you, challenge the underlying software. Here's the problem. You'll find out the courts accept this, and that's what the consternation of the attorneys are, without the challenge, without the opening up of the proprietary software. And now we're back to being government in commerce protecting its bottom line. So bring all these possibilities to you, what you're up against. You got to take it into account. If you know this kind of things, and if you're dealing with other people, and you expand what this is telling you onto every other so-called proof of evidence that's brought to bear on something you might want to do, you can just destroy it by having the proper understanding of what the trick is. It's like watching a magician. It's not so cool once you know the answer. Now, some people are really good, and they still cause you to watch it because it's still cool to watch. But once you understand the magic trick, the mystery is finished, isn't it? So once you understand the magic trick behind how they're deceiving you and how you're deceived, and you can know that you can be deceived, and so you have to look through even that, I think we're going to be much more empowered. We have to go against our own witness at some level as well. This is a really sophisticated attack. I have to appreciate how evil is in this construction that we have here in this universe, this planet. However we got here, there's certainly a glitch in that matrix. I can tell you, and it's exploited to no end. Why I keep telling you, at least begin to put a toe in the sea of fallibility, but go read the Protocols of Elders of Zion. Not like we're told it's supposed to read, but take it to heart. Take it that's you. Take it that's you. And understand it that way. A forensic lab caught fabricating results cast doubt on almost 8,000 criminal cases. Folks, the crime against you is everywhere. Forensics labs, I talked to the FBI, creates this evidence. They don't even check into the actual properness of the software used to analyze DNA, finding lots and lots of errors. Now the forensic labs are building evidence, and it just popped in my mind quickly. Think about Lavoie Finicum and all the evidence the forensic lab would create in order to protect the state, to get that conviction. These are the criminals that we're up against. I don't know what more to say. I just want you to know that they're there, and I can only tell you, having the knowledge, it may sit idle in you for a long time, and then all of a sudden, wait a minute, wasn't there something somewhere about this problem? And it may not be against you. It may be against your friend or loved one that you say, wait a minute, I'm going to help because I have this knowledge that they want to sweep under the rug, or they want to pass it off as legitimate. And I can't say everything is no good that you can't believe in, but there's a lot that comes from authority that isn't, because it's an organized criminal syndicate. It has to cover this up. It has to do these things. As we found out, like I said, if you just fought traffic tickets, if you understood the narrow scope of those traffic issues, they wouldn't have anything to do in the state courts. There's not that much business regarding traffic tickets, properly applied. It's your ignorance and your failure to persist against and give the proper response, and then find out the criminal corruption that is, as I've been explaining to you, it's literally organized crime doing money laundering through theft by extortion and felony coercion. They garner your signature by extortion and coercion, and they do lots of things. It's really a money laundering scheme and artifice, which I will put in the term trafficking at one level as well, additionally, but it's not really just trafficking. There are a different definition. It's when they use law or law process to extort these monies from you, or these things, that's particularly the money, is money laundering. When they do the laws and process in order to take advantage, undue enrichment, or this gains, or just take control of your life, unlawfully restrain your liberty under the color of that, that's trafficking. The law processes now. So when you understand this and you start seeing, well, that's theft by extortion, it's another felony, and theft by coercion, that's another felony. These people are just criminals. I tell you, I don't have another word for them. I don't even have a judgment on it. It's just that action is a crime at a very high level. I don't think we appreciate how high level the crime is. That when you get into the system and you don't know how to fight from the outside and keep it that way, even though they're going to keep coming at you because they're a criminal, they keep coming, brought their processes, and they keep thinking that, put you under warrants of arrest and all this nonsense. Which at some point if you make a nice coherent record, you can start showing other people. Maybe they'll get riled up about it. Maybe. That once you get in, you have all this other crime that's going on underneath that looks like evidence. It's, again, I told you, in the rules of evidence, the system is presumed to provide law lawfully, evidence lawfully, with lawful mandates. It's all presumed on them against you. That those are the presumptions that they have said. They couldn't say this otherwise as an occupying force. They have to make provision for you to throw that off. And if they don't, then there's a facial violation of the failure to provide due process. So they make these provisions. I've found them everywhere. You can exercise them, and then the next thing you'll come up against is that they just disregard them or find ways to make it look like they've disregarded it, so you have to take the next step. And yes, who would like any of this, but this is the reality. You can walk away from it. You can say, put your hand, go away. You could do all that, but by doing that, that's why we're here where we're at. And I'm just trying to bring these things, all the different ways that our witness of our own reality is falsified in us. With their help, but in us. And that's up to us to see through. And until we do, I don't see much happening, actually. I don't. I mean, that's the negative part. If I start thinking about that part, we're done, folks. We're screwed. SCROD, it's over. Have enough respect in yourself, folks, to step up against that at least, please. That would be, just a little bit would go a long way. 1% stepping up that way inside yourself. That's a big 1%. Because a lot of it's not happening at all. Oregon County informant scandal just got nuttier. Very interesting stories around the country. You can see how things work behind the scenes. It's like nothing is hidden really anymore. And so that's the thing. The license given to these criminals is the fact that, well, we told you, the news was there. You should have known better than to engage with us. And I'm telling you that there's a way to at least make the record that you didn't have to engage. And when they trespass, that's a secondary set of felonies that you just keep heaping on them. I mean, just quickly, in a criminal case, we just did a collateral action for usurpation of office. That's a civil action inside a criminal case to show that the system is a criminal. And that's not an opinion. We laid it out. It was laid out. Now, we got the record. It was a default. Do we think it's a silver bullet? No, but here we got the record. They're literally agreed that they're organized criminals doing money laundering and all the other things I just told you about. Has that record ever been made before without opinion and normally we hear the lawsuit, but see, the lawsuit hands it back over to them to decide that, doesn't it? We're doing this as a default, so they've incriminated themselves. Where does that go? Well, probably not so far if everyone else becomes a cricket with that notice that they're dealing with the criminal and it continues to do business, if you will, with that. If you haven't been paying attention, Orange County, California is in the midst of a massive scandal, like how else? I mean, it's on and on over there, involving a district attorney's office and the use of informants. DA Tony Rockakis, I'll bet that is in a big bucket. And his staff have been berated by judges one of who recused the entire office from a murder case, had convictions overturned, and even let accused killers go free rather than disclose how they use informants. It's a massive scandal and ought to be national news. Now, again, it's a Washington Post article. You really need to read this and understand how this works. Understand some things. Interesting, the judges stepped up to let people go that weren't going to have the informants disclosed to them. That was doing justice even if the guy killed somebody. See, there is due process. There was a judge that got so fed up he did that. That should happen in every case. That's why they've had to fabricate all this other stuff so that doesn't look like that's going on. But what I found interesting is they recused officers of the DA's office in a murder case. That's an interesting problem. But then he didn't actually go after them, did he? The judge didn't do the law and do accountability, does he? So he's complicit at some level. So when I get to this, you read this issue down in Orange County, California, Southern California in particular, just a hotbed of. If you wanted to know all the ways you can be violated, just start looking at L.A. as well. I'm sure it's everywhere, but that's one of the stories I hear coming out of L.A. are known. I mean, it's coming out. It's oozing out all over. The sponge of government is just oozing right now of corruption. And so we can continue to let it go or not. But here's another example of how these prosecutors are supposed to hold a high standard are just criminals themselves. As I told you, the collateral action for usurpation of office or franchise was supposed to substitute a quo warranto. They handed that prosecution to the local DA. Which for us is a joke because the local DA is the criminal here. It's just like in the Orange County case. We're dealing with the same problem here where we are with my friend with his case. And so we're making the record to out it. We're not whining and complaining. Well, I'm whining and complaining a little bit. It's a lot of work. But we're still making the record and methodically, step by step, exposing the whole entire thing, utilizing a mixture of criminal rights and then civil response and remedy. And just to let you know, you got to look at your Constitution. You want to get before all of this system. Find the right you have in Constitution, if you have it, in order for remedy for yourself. That pretty much trumps any place they may have to say that you're doing frivolous arguments or excessive paper filing when you base it into constitutional aspects. If you don't, you just go by your opinion and stuff you found on the internet. They'll take you out. In fact, that's why those rules came in, so they could take you out. But crime is everywhere. DAs are criminals. You all know that, but but by just saying that, that's not enough. When you find someone that's getting involved, they're being violated, it's like allowing you're being an accessory to that violation to the guy next to you that is involved in the system, that is having this happen to them by these mechanisms. And that's why, in a way, I say periodically, I'm condemning you, my listeners. Once you really take this to heart, you realize that this is a big job. That you are now imposed with this duty to realize that there's a crime against us, and we have a duty among the peace treaty that we have amongst ourselves is we have to arrest those crimes, otherwise they run rampant against all of us. And why wouldn't we want to help out our brother, so-called, in this regard, and notwithstanding the Cain principle? More information, something near and dear to my energies and hearts a long time back, that I talked to you about when I was going to make the documentary on child services and the children, the families being destroyed by this international imposition that set up the child's rights, were family courts, and how they came in and destroyed people, again coming out of, I think, now mid central California. Again, just evidence of it. So those of you walking into this thing, you understand what's happening, what to look for, how to prepare to gauge the problems that are there that may be unseen. They too come out with racketeering and honest services fraud. Sacramento County Family Court, Law Court operates in RICO racketeering enterprise, charge the whistleblowers. This you'll find consistent. I'll just tell you, just seeing racketeering honest services, that's a federal charge, because typically that's not something that's easy. Honest services is not typically a state thing. Honest services is a felony under federal law. And so when you tie it back over to the federal funds being used for all this, you can get into federal violations, what we're setting up in this other case as well. It's state law violations first that set up all the elements that qualify a RICO, mail fraud, extortion racket, trafficking racket. It's not just so-called human trafficking. It's not just sex trafficking. It's just not labor trafficking. It's actually the using the law or process of law to harm you, to actually cause the business that is not lawful against you to be conducted. That's a felony as well under trafficking. Just give it a simple term so we don't get too lost. This is all what you're living. That a lot of y'all, I know that we don't engage the system. Well, that's what it is. That's what you have to call out instead of turn away. When you turned away, thousands of other people got harmed. No different than when I couldn't persist. It's like I said, I'm disappointed I couldn't, but I don't take it as a shame on me for not being able to complete a documentary that exposed exactly what they're talking about here. RICO racketeering, it's charged whistleblowers, it's human trafficking, it's child services, it's services to adults. This is a big, bad deal. So here you have it. The Family Court Division, Sacramento Superior Court is controlled and operated by an illegal parallel government structured, made up of local divorce lawyers who all will also work as part-time judges and corrupt employees and clerks and full-time judges, according to a whistleblower leaked documents and court a watchdog. So all those were linked. You'll get this in the Blogcaster. I could say the same thing for about everywhere I've looked in government with when you deal with the Bar Association system of just us. So someone else, independents, confirming the very fact in the very same way, the very same subject matter of so-called child rights, and it's why. It's because it comes from that international foreign imposition, and no one's checked that, and no one had accountability to it. And then they said, we're saving the children. Another UN fraud, like it comes in like women, children, the indigenous, and climate change. All continuous frauds. Unsubstantiated. They run a complete system of organized criminal syndicate underneath this. The mafia drools at this kind of power. I've talked to you in the concept that this is an occupying force. We can look at it in a lot of different ways. This one is if you will, the foreign invader, usurper in the Bar Association, occupying your laws, occupying your seat of decision, occupying the people that are getting influenced about making the decisions if they're not part of the bar, on and on and on. We did all this. We exposed to this in the 2013 injunction. So this is not me, just my opinion. This is not just opinion coming out of Sacramento. This is the facts that we can find on top of what our opinions would say, that we're taking and working with, engaging these criminals to put them in a corner, and hopefully we'll give them a little, be smart enough to maybe push them out the door. Don't put them in a corner. If you put them in a corner, make sure there's a rat hole that they can crawl out of. So, because you want them gone. Watch what Russia's been doing. They've been leaving ways for the rats to escape, for us to escape. They don't make a corner to capture them in. They kind of hit them with a U shape. They hit them in a U shape and let them go and let them run away. You don't want to put them in a corner. And that's how we can do it. We can just say, listen, that's why we say rescue yourself. I say you give them 2 or 3 options to leave. Once they have failed, like the third time, that's a charm. They've agreed to be there and suffer the consequences. And they know that. So it's not even they're put in a corner by their own action. You don't put them there. So a new study shows that even cops commit crime on video 96% of the time, and they aren't prosecuted. Speaks to this occupation. Speaks to the control of your society. Speaks to the military occupation behind this on top of that. Speaks to why you want to go wild on this gold fringe flag stuff. Speaks to why you're not going to get much answers when you ask them straight questions. The military soldier in the form of these cops in uniform, the gang blue, not gang green, but gang blue. I guess you're out of oxygen here, so you're turning blue. That gang in an occupied military occupation would not be prosecuted to those very high levels, because the military only prosecutes their soldiers to very extreme violations of what we found would be found in the Lieber Code. Now, read the Lieber Code. You're talking about the protocols of elders of Zion. Read the Lieber Code. You want to see the thumbnail of how this works. But here's this new study that says that we live in an occupied territory and it's military. Okay, let me put it this way. Forget what I just said in my observation. What society do you live in? Find a name for it. What kind of a society do you live in where 96% of the soldiers are not prosecuted or held accountable after killing you, beating you all down? And you can come up with a name. It won't be peace. I can just tell you that. And it won't be under law, as our peace treaty would say. We want to maintain maintain the tension amongst ourselves. There is a defined word for what 96% non-prosecution of soldiers killing you is. I call it martial law. I call it that because that's what it's defined as in the Lieber Code. I don't make this stuff up. I'm really not that smart. I've been able to put some stuff together, and it makes more sense to me than what I'm told. I guess that's the point. And I guess I can remember that to retell it to you. Which a lot of people, some will agree, and a lot more will disagree with, which is kind of fascinating. But I call it martial law because I can see that reflection in Lieber Code. You call it whatever you want. Think about that. What society do you live in where brutalizers are 96% of the time not held accountable? Make a name up. And then I have to ask yourself, why do you live in that society? Why are you allowing that to exist or allow it to be around you? Or more importantly, allowing that to happen in the future to you as well? I can't make those decisions. Those are all up to us. And we'll all have our own reasons and whatever. That's the reality. We live in an anarchy, and that's the whole, people don't want to understand this. That there is no order and peace. Even in the peace treaty that we live under amongst ourselves. Somewhere it fell apart, and we didn't keep that republic. And we get this kind of stuff. Federal judge says recording police not protected by the First Amendment. Now, this is a long time ago news. I'm getting to tabs. There's so much stuff to talk about. Maybe understand this one or not. This is such an anomaly. I don't even know where to go, but I'll tell you what. One part of me is saying this is exactly what they're telling, what they want you to know. This is exactly where it's going to end up going. We're clueless to where this thing really is. However, here it is. Over the years, the nation's courts have moved towards recognizing First Amendment protections for citizens who film public servants carrying out public duties. Nearly every case has involved a citizen arrested by filming police officers, suggesting far too many law enforcement entities still feel their public actions deserve some sort of secrecy. Even as these agencies deploy broader and more powerful surveillance tools aimed at the same public areas where no exception of privacy under the Fourth Amendment exists. But here we have, I had to stop there. Where are you living that this is even acceptable at all? That someone working in a public capacity believes they have a privacy. I mean, short of having to relieve themselves in the public bathroom or when they're off a line and not doing something or talking about their own privacy, their own personnel, their own contract of employment and all that. Absent all that, what kind of a society do you live in where the police even came to the idea that they have deserved privacy in their public function? A rather disturbing conclusion has been reached by a federal court in Pennsylvania. 2 cases involving people who had their photography efforts interrupted by police officers have resulted in the court finding that there is no First Amendment right to film public servants. So you have to listen very carefully to what's being said right here. And now you look into how they're strictly construing every stupid word. That provision wasn't even stated, so we're not going to agree to that. See, it's not law being applied, but it's this reflexive reaction of the agenda to come that I want you to pay attention to. I think at some point this is being thrown down, even now, even with the surveillance society. But to come up to this point and say it that way is kind of, it's highly educational, at least for me. Neither of the plaintiffs, Richard Fields nor Amanda Garesi, were filming the police conduct because they had a criticism or challenge to what they were seeing. Understand what they just said. That's the reason why they had no right to film the public, is because they didn't state that they had a criticism or challenge to what they were seeing. In other words, they've constrained it to, again, you presuming you have actually no right unless you can articulate your right. And this is the word in your mouth I'm talking about. Learn from this. Have something to say. I guess that's the most important part about this decision. If this is where they're going to go, and this is what comes out in the article, say that you have now a criticism to make against what you see. I say, you're a witness to a crime. Don't tamper with a witness. That's what I've been saying. I believe I'm witnessing a crime. Don't tamper with me or my stuff. See, that's a word in your mouth about what you're doing. Same thing with a FOIA. You just don't send off for information. You got to tell them, you waive the fees by saying that you think it's going to be, you're witnessing, you're investigating a crime. You put this right down in the documentation. You think you're witnessing a crime that may be used in, this information may be used in a future litigation. You have to have any more of the word in your mouth, is what I've been telling you all this time. And that's what this case does for, is astonishing. This is really a shocker here. But this is predictive of the future as well. The citizens urge us to find, for the first time in this circuit, photographing police without any challenge or criticism. Criticism is expressive conduct protected by the First Amendment. While we instinctively understand the citizens' argument, you subject slave, particularly with rapidly developing instant imaging sharing technology, we find no basis to craft a new First Amendment right based solely upon the observing and recording without expressive conduct and consistent with the technology of the Supreme Court and our Court of Appeals, and we decline to do so today. Fascinating discussion. Completely stupid, but there it is. They're willing to say it, I guess, is the point that gets me. Just want you to know. Have a word in your mouth. This is all I've really been saying. Educate yourself enough to know what that word is in any number of positions and conditions and situations. Let me make it less esoteric as it strikes me. Recently, cop pulls someone over who was actually parked on private property in a driveway and wants to know about a sticker that wasn't in the back window. And the first question out of the mouth of the gentleman in the seat was, what's your subject matter jurisdiction? That becomes critical in the whole exercise of what's going on now, because the subject matter that we understand is that the cop is coming in commerce. and a producer is not in commerce. And it's clearly differentiated in the constitutions if you know what you're looking for, and the statutes. Even the occupier's own code makes the distinction. So having something to say instead of arguing or yelling or screaming or calling them names is what I think this lesson is here. If they want you to have to say, it's stupid what they're asking us, but if this is what the occupier is now making as a standard, you better have it in your mouth to say. You better just now say, I'm challenging or have criticism of what I'm witnessing. Well, to me, I'm a witness. I say, we've said this for long years. I believe I'm witnessing a crime. And so I'm recording that. Don't tamper with me. So you have to have I guess the point is you have to have a statement that's more and beyond than what most of us have been shown to do and the way we passively respond to things or are encouraged by the internet to respond improperly. It drives me nuts. I mean, really drives me nuts, folks. All you have to do is go look at the standards and you apply it. You have to answer to the standards, not what the meme is on the internet. Oh, do you have subject matter jurisdiction? Do you have a probable cause? The cop just said yes. Now what? That was a quick one. Well, the first time it happened, the cop was kind of confused. Well, he was told. He got back home, and they explained to their army, their soldiers, their gang, how to respond to that. Just tell them, yeah. And they did. And then people got more in trouble. Now, it doesn't mean that that's a silver bullet, because what are you speaking to? You've probably got someone in your face that's ignorant of what your rights are if you know them. And they're not going to give them to you. So you got a felon right there to begin with. So however you want to handle that, you better be nice because he's armed. The point is that when you construct your case, you're doing it right from the first point of contact. And you make consistency in that point of contact and that information that you're giving out. You don't talk out of your opinion. You talk out of the law immediately and the distinctions and the jurisdictions and whatever else you have for yourself. I don't know what it can be. And you carry that objective basis all the way through identifying all the harms. When a subject matter is not stated, and you can identify one that you're not within that you know they are, they've just now violated the law. That's a felony. You've got to be able to just pull that out, copy and paste. It's not even hard. So you don't have you're not a one-trick pony on this either. And you're not the one you find only on the internet. And you're not okay, you take notes. Those of you that do and listen repeatedly, thank you for that and for your hard work, and I hope it rewards you one day, because that's the key. It doesn't mean nothing if no one's going to do anything with it. So to me, I'm here to put it out, but I don't take much for it, because it doesn't mean anything until someone can use it. And I'm glad to have been a help for those of you that needed it. That's absolutely fantastic. It's one less that got taken down or so easily. That you don't even take what I'm saying as a sole answer. You build from what I'm saying. Again, requires your engagement. It absolutely requires your engagement. I don't mean go out and get tickets to do this. You may have to do that on the run, but you can prepare to understand. You can do administrative interventions. You can give advice to people that may have it wrong, that you can show, that you can tell them a better way. This is where we can play our part as we all learn about this dysfunctional society that we think is real and right. Because it starts to devolve down to where not only are they saying that little claim of right to photograph the police is not going to be recognized, that you have to make a statement of criticism or challenge against the actions of what was happening. They then expanded this reflexive condition of agenda. Let us inspect your home for dirty dishes, or we'll get a warrant, city says, as this thing starts to envelop and develop and go on, and we keep letting it happen. A Minnesota city is asking a court for a warrant to enter a rental home in order to check to see if the place is clean. If the city wins the case, then inspectors apparently would be able to enter such a building anytime they wish. As I would look at that, when they made the threat, that's extortion and coercion and felony, isn't it? If all they said was, we want to come in and we're going to force you to get a warrant, if you force us to if you don't let us in, we're making a warrant, then they apparently recognize that you have the right to resist it, don't you? And then they threaten you with a warrant. Legal process. Now, if there's a ticket on the other end with money, to me, that's using process for trafficking. If you just tie this together, is it going to win? I don't know, but at least you can throw it back in the face of the code officer that came in and now is going to be on the hook if he loses or she loses. That's the private action that they did as a felony. because their lawful action, it was only done under the color of a lawful action, not that it was. The renters and tenants say that they have nothing to hide, but are opposing the. Let's look in your hard drive, folks. Let's get you on the internet. Let's look at your traffic on the internet. These people have nothing to hide. Put it in the same context, but are opposing the city's move based on principle. Hey, get behind the woodshed. They must have been behind here. I hope it's more than principle as well. There's a law that backs up all of this. We just have to get back to using it. If they want to leave dirty dishes in the sink, they say, then it should be perfectly legal. Well, that's the wrong way to approach that. What's the authority to make it a question? Quote, your home is your castle. Well, this is their statement now. Your home is your castle, irrespective of whether you rent it or own it, says Anthony Sanders, an attorney for Institute for Justice, which is representing the renters and tenants. Quote, what we do in our home is our business, not the government's. The mere fact that if someone rents a home rather than owns it should not give the government the right to disrupt their life, invade their privacy, search every nook and cranny of their homes, all without providing a shred of evidence that anything is wrong. It is a fundamental violation of the Minnesota Constitution's protection against illegal searches. So in that, you should have heard all the accentuations I make of all where this attorney's speaking in commerce speak, how the tenants have less than fee simple rights, how they might be subject, not as the possessors that they ought to be representing themselves underneath the right of the landlord being not a landlord but a grand patentee. We have a different way to discuss all this, but the attorney comes in and talks about it in commerce. And instinctively, we know that maybe they shouldn't be. But, the court just came out and said, we're not going to carve out a special compensation. This is what you're looking at. So they want to see your dirty dishes or not, and they'll get a warrant to do so. Well, folks, force them to get their warrant. That's all I can tell you. Once they get the warrant, then you can identify whether or not the court had authority to issue that warrant. You can go after all of them if you have to, but this is the world we live in. This is the oppressor oppressing under the color of doing it correctly. And I try to bring every week the means to stop these people. They're just employees. As we were having some conversation, I had to finally ask the question, talking to a governor's aide who denies the property rights that we're presenting and the right we have to livelihood and the work. And I finally came to the conclusion to ask, why don't we just ask them this? Because undermining law and all property law, title is the very first thing you lead with. You either have it or you don't. That's the first then. If you don't have it, it's over. Where is their title to the land that they are obligated to protect in you, that they have a say to deny you the very rights you're saying you have that you were granted? Where did it come that these government officials, by their employment in government, were given license to disrespect this? Where? Where was it that society turned into that? Because it changed somewhere, because it never used to be really actually like that. There was a modicum of respect. But we've lost all of that. Now you can't talk to anybody in government without saying we are the authority. And in fact, when I look at the disposal laws, it's absolutely, they have zero authority. And yet we never impress anybody with that in the first instance with the question. Let me see your title to your ability to challenge me and cause the burden to be falling on me to prove your denial of my property rights. And that's what I said earlier in the broadcast. How is that? If I have proof that shows that you're not right. If we engage this and I present this to you, it will be evidence that you've committed a felony. Now, you're going to put that burden on me and I'm going to show you're a felon, or are you going to go find your right and to come and interfere and trespass on my property so that we know you have warrant in law? Isn't that just the quo warranto I was talking about? We have to approach all this a whole lot differently. It seems to kind of cleans up a little bit, as I find. It doesn't mean that we are fixing the system, but there's a few more people that start getting lined in on how it's really supposed to be, and that hopefully, and it does usually, reduce the workload quite a bit. As they encroach into our homes, as I said, the community care, now they want to know about your dishes. At DHS and FBI and Intrado Communications are giving our homes threat assessments. Intrado Communications is the company behind assigning every home a threat rating, and it's run by the two former deputies, the FBI and the DHS. In essence, running out of time. They now take threat assessments on what you do, what you contact, who you tell. They take all this documentation down. This probably ties around to the census when they were measuring your UPS and GPS addresses right to your front door with your mail, your address, your federalized postal zip code address. Your address is not your that address is not your address. Your address has a name. Your location is where you are. They don't have a location. GPS census workers were doing all that. They now have you right down to your front door. They also now take information of everything you do, and the DHS is taking collection. We're talking about big data and how this works, and they do a threat assessment. They say it's for security and safety, and it's for their security and safety. Next time a SWAT team comes and you've got a little bit of a question on your record, they'll make sure to have enough people to take you down. And so they got into your house now, and they're looking at everything you do to be attached to an address. Why I keep telling you one of the secrets is to not have one. Not at least the federalized one. I've told you about this quite a few times before. It says it like in the motor vehicle code. That's where I learned it. They say that a resident's address is not one thing. I'm not going to give you the answer. I've told it to you before, but I'm not going to give it to you today. There's one thing that's not a resident's address, and you have to prove residence in order to be part of the commerce system. Residence is an alien doing business in a foreign state, and you agree to all that. And so there's one location that they can't use as a residence address, the evidence of which proves you couldn't be in there, and they're not supposed to mess with you. And when they do, it's a felony. Do we get accountability? We're living in an organized criminal syndicate. Now, you tell me when that's going to happen, and I'm going to tell you we're going to persist until we do, though. And so those of you that think you're going to be helpful to help defeat the terrorists out there while the government's actually the military that's against you, DARPA will pay you, yes you, to build a homemade bomb. In an effort to defend against improvised explosive attacks, the Pentagon's research arm, DARPA, is looking to pay crafty hobbyists capable of turning household items into bombs. Now, that should have triggered some NSA. Bombs. So they're going to get you to be the crafty little rat in order to figure out your little defensive devices within that. You can still get at home in order to identify how they're going to take those away from you in the future, and you'll get paid for it. That one little rat's going to get paid for it to expose how smart he is. And it's going to start to take away everything that can be done that we may ever need in the future under the Second Amendment to protect ourselves. This is how it works. These guys are brilliant. We don't have a clue. So you can go ahead and get paid with your bucks. They'll give you quite a few bucks to do this one, because it answers quite a bit, and there'll be a whole lot less stuff you can go down to the hardware store to get as well for those of us that are just using it innocently. I don't know how many things I can't go down and get anymore, and I'm thinking, well, what happened? Oh, well, they found out they can make a bomb or a drug out of it. When did we go to our technology now has to be used against us, and we don't get the benefit of the technology? It's a wonder to me that we just kind of sit crickets again. Crickets. Fascinating. And so they'll offer you rewards to tattle on yourself. As I told you before, they did it to me. They didn't pay me for that. The payment we got was that we didn't have to pay the fine. The ticket went away. I went in the law and I said, well, I can find all these loopholes. We'll make motions and we'll get all this stuff set aside before it even becomes an issue. And everything I would find, they would, within 2 years, the legislature would make a new law and make it more difficult or actually plug that loophole. Just tighten that noose right around our neck. We couldn't use it no more. So our craftiness was used against us. And why did that judge say we will not craft another law? It's all a craft. It's all witchcraft what these judges do. They're all sorcerers. Start to realize the reality that you're in. Stop giving it names and excuses, and let's get after dealing with it. I think we can make a clean. It's spring. Let's do some spring cleaning here. Thank you for tuning in today. Looks like time's up. Do appreciate the donations, the contributions, the listenership, what you can do to help to promote, where you can send the podcast, all that. RealLibertyMedia.com is where we hail out of primary broadcast. We have World Truth, which will be closing now. We're going to Freedom's network, and we have maybe a couple more that might be starting up for more networks and communication. We have UCY.TV. Thank you over there for Jules and all your listeners there. And the YouTube that gets set up, and FM and AM broadcasters. I do appreciate all of your help to get the word out. And it's just a matter that we kind of come to terms. I kind of got the feeling, even though I get frustrated and kind of disappointed over how many people are not really acting, engaging what I see in proper ways, feeling kind of scared. you know, it's going to be one of those things, very possibly, if the archives ever last into the future, it'll be one of those things of, oh, that's what that guy was talking about. Now, I hope that's being said when we're kind of freed up and they'll laugh that we even had to talk about it. I hope it's not finding out that it's all a secret. I've been bootlegged through the system in order to give you the tools that you need, and asking you then, why don't we listen ahead of time and let's do stuff ahead of time to avoid this and just bring on that more peaceful existence. Thank you. Take care.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
So that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.